Hi there, this is Rishabh and I welcome you to this video. In this video, I'm going to talk about Git and GitHub. Now, if you're not familiar with what Git or GitHub is, then this is definitely going to be a very helpful video for you. And even if you know or even if you're familiar with what is Git and what is GitHub, I think this video can really help you brush up on your concepts. So let's get started. Well, let's start with a story. Let's think about programmers who lived before GitHub or before Git. Well, imagine that there are two to three developers who are working on a complex project, and for some reason they all end up changing the same file. Now, how do you think they would be able to share their changes with each other? What are the different options which they have? Let's try to imagine their situation. Let's say I am one of them, let's say you are the other one, and let's say we have somebody who's not present here. Now, what would they do? Well, one of the options is that I will go to your seat, I will sit with you, and I'll tell you manually that please add these lines of code, right? And you will probably add those lines, right? Of course, this is a very manual process. It will take hours to complete. But yeah, this is one of the options, right? What is the other option? Well, maybe what we can do is we can be a little smart. You can probably take files from me. You can compare them side by side in some text editor. You can see what are the different lines which are added by me, what are the different lines which are removed by me, and you can compare them with your changes. I believe even if you are able to do this, you will probably end up making a lot of errors. So this is exactly what the problem was in the pre-Git times. Now let me tell you that Git is nothing but a version control system which basically tracks how exactly a file changed over the period of time and who exactly made those changes. Now every developer ends up having his own copy of the Git repository, and then there are certain features like taking off branches from the repository, then merging those branches back to a main or a master branch. And all these features, they really solve this problem of distributed development, which means that even if there are 10 developers who are working on the same project, who are playing with the same file again and again, Git still has that capability that it can track all those changes. Not only it can track those changes, but it allows you to merge those changes without making many mistakes. So what it essentially means is that what used to be a task of days is now a task of minutes with the help of Git. Okay, coming to the second question, what is GitHub? Well, GitHub is a web application which allows you to use all the features of Git. You can host your repositories on GitHub. And the best part is that GitHub provides basically a central, you can say a central repository system, meaning that if the repository is present on your machine and if you want to make some changes, you can basically make those changes and push your changes to GitHub, and everybody else who's working on the project with you or who's collaborating on the project with you, they can take those changes from GitHub. So GitHub basically acts as a central place where you can push your changes or where you can host your repository. Is GitHub the only application which supports all these Git operations? Well, the answer is no. There are many other players in this area, you can say. Some of them are, well, GitHub is one, GitLab is another, Bitbucket by Atlassian is another. Then AWS Cloud has their own offering which is called as Code Commit. Azure and GCP has their own offerings. So meaning that GitHub is not the only option, but Git as a tool or Git as a software is unique in itself, as it's a version control system. Cool. Now in this video, we will be exploring some very basics. We will be touching upon some basic commands of Git, and I'll definitely be creating a repository on GitHub. So let's get started with that only. Cool. So this is my account. My account is already set up. Actually, let me do one thing. Let me just sign out. So just like any other web application, you will see that there is a landing page. You can click on sign in. And by the way, if you do not have an account, you can first click on sign up, and you can add all the details which they ask for, like your email and some other details. and you can create your account, right? So if you already have an account, you can simply go and sign in. Now I already have an account, so I can simply enter my username or email address, I can enter my password, then I'm good to sign in. Awesome. So this is how the interface looks like, and I won't be spending too much time on this interface. So what's important for us is this button, wherein I can say new repository. Now it says, what do you want to name your repository? So because in this channel we are mostly talking about Python, let me just call it some scripts. Sounds good. Just a very basic name. A collection, let's say description is a collection of code scripts. Very simple. You can put in any description based on what project you are working on. Is this going to be a public repository or a private repository? What is the difference? A public repository is visible to others, meaning as it is written here that anyone on the internet can see this repository, and again you still have the control on who can commit. On the other hand, if your repository is private, then you can decide who can see this repository and who can commit to this repository, right? Initializing this repository with adme file, with a readme file. So readme file is nothing but a file wherein you can describe what exactly your project is about. And similarly, we can add a git ignore file. Now this is an important file. Let me first give a brief about what exactly is a git ignore file. So in your repository, there are always going to be certain files which are present on your local machine, but you don't want them to go into your GitHub repository, and those files you need to specify in the git ignore file. Now let me actually choose my language here, that is Python, and you will see that certain things are already added to this git ignore file. We will see what exactly those things are, and it will actually help us to make this concept even more clear. Now based on my research, MIT is basically one of the most relaxing license which is present, and whenever you are creating an open source software, it is recommended to use the MIT license. But again, you have many options, and feel free to explore what exactly are the restrictions in each of this license, what exactly is conveyed or written in each of these licenses, and based on that you can decide what license you want to choose. Cool. And this will set main as the default branch, change the default name in your settings. Now this is saying that there is going to be a main branch. It is going to act as the primary branch for this repository. If I need to change it, I can go and do that in settings, but for now I don't think I need to do that. So now that we have put in all the details, I think we are good to create the repository. Awesome. So now that we have the repository, so one of the steps is done. We have created the repository on GitHub. Now the next step is that we have to clone this repository. So there are a few options here. I can use GitHub CLI, I can use SSH, I can use HTTPS. For now I'm going to choose the simple option, that is HTTPS. I can simply clone this URL from here. Now let's go to the VS Code or the editor of your choice, and first of all in the terminal let's check whether Git is installed or not. So if I type Git, I can see a lot of commands are there, and if Git is by any chance not installed on your machine, what you have to do is you just have to go to Google and you have to say install Git on whatever your operating system is. For example, if you are using Ubuntu, you can go to Ubuntu, you can follow the instructions which are given to install Git, and you can simply install Git. So like installing Git is just like installing any other software, so we are not going into the details of how to install Git. I believe you will be able to do it just by doing a simple Google search. Coming back to the video. Awesome, so we can use the clone command and clone the repository with the help of the URL which we obtained from here. So here is my git clone and the URL which we copied from GitHub. Let us just hit enter. Cool, as you can see that we have the scripts repository all set to go. Now a few things which I would like to talk about here. On Mac operating system, it will ask me for credentials only for the first time, and as you noticed that this time it didn't ask me for the credentials, right? But on your operating system, and depending upon how exactly you have set up things, it may actually ask for credentials, and when I say credentials, it will be asking you for the username and a personal access token. And so before I go ahead, so yes, let me first talk about how exactly you can get your personal access token. So you can go to GitHub, you can go to your profile, and not to your profile, but go to the settings, and you will see a section called developer settings, and here you will see personal access tokens, fine grained tokens, and tokens classic. So here you can create a new token, and like I have some expired tokens here, we can ignore them for now. But yes, this is how you generate a new token, and this token you can use as your password, because GitHub won't accept your password, it will only accept this token as the password. Awesome. Now that I believe you would have cloned this repository by now, so now let's add some content to this repository. Now in the nutshell, if you see that repository is nothing but just like another directory, just that it has got some properties. Let me just do an ls, let me go to scripts. Now if I do ls -al, you can see that there's a directory called as .git. This is what makes this directory special. This is what makes this folder a repository, because there's a lot of information which is stored here. And then this is the git ignore file. Git ignore file basically talks about what are all the things which we need to ignore. So as you can see that if it will find any of these files, they will be ignored, because of the fact that these files are required only on my local machine, and there is absolutely no reason why I should be committing them or pushing them to the remote server. Now let's go ahead and add some content to this repository. Let me add a new file. Let's call it hello repo.py, hello _repo.py, and let's put in some Python code here. So let's say, I think seems like I have created it outside of scripts. Okay, let me move it inside. Yes, cool. So print hello to the world of GitHub, Git and Github actually. Cool. Okay, yeah. Now let's see whether this is running fine. We can say Python. Oh yes, it is running fine. Now that you have written the code, whatever code you had to write, now let's simply follow a simple tradition. There are three basic commands which are very important, like at a very basic level. So if I check git status, I can see that hello repo.py. You can see that this is an untracked file so far, meaning that this is not being tracked in this repository so far. So let me add this file to the repository, git add hello repo.py, and if I check the status now you can see that on branch main, your branch is up to date with origin main, changes to be committed. So these are the changes which are staged but not yet committed. So we need to commit the changes. So git commit -m. So when I'm committing some changes, I have to give a message which talks about what exactly is it that I have done. Now for this specific or this basic example, I can say added hello repo.py file. Simple. Cool. So we are all set. Now what I can do is, now I can say git push, and these changes will be pushed to the central repository. So let's just go ahead and check it out. So hello repo, we have just added this. Now if I go back to GitHub, now if I go back to my, let's say, profile, and the repository scripts basically, in this user only, yes. Okay, so here is the scripts. Cool. As you can see that the hello repo.py file is now here, and anybody who clones this repository will have the access to this hello repo.py file. Of course, they can make the changes to this file, they can commit the file back, and then okay, let me actually show you something interesting. I can go to history, and as you can see that Rishabh IO committed, and we can actually see that what all is committed. So as you can see that this is the content which was added by Rishabh IO. And similarly, whosoever adds any content or any code, it's kind of trackable, it's visible to everybody. And that's the best part. Whatever, like if there are any changes, we can always track them. And other than that, there are other interesting features, but in this video I just given that we have already covered a lot of content, so I want to limit ourselves to these commands only. So there are 5 commands we have primarily focused on. First one was git clone, using which we can clone any repository from GitHub. Then we talked about git add, which is used to stage the files, to stage the untracked files. Then we talked about git commit, which helps us to commit the changes. And then we talked about git push, which helps us to push those changes from our local machine to the central repository. And then the other command was git status, which basically talks about the current status. So like let's say if I do a git status, it says that your branch is up to date with the origin main, nothing to commit, and working tree is clean. Okay, now before I wrap up this video, I would like to talk about one more command. Let's say some other developer made some changes to this repository. How will you get those changes before you start writing any code? The command for that is git pull. So git pull basically helps you to pull any changes which are done on the remote by anybody else or by you only from some different location or some different machine. So in this way, you can always stay up to date. So whenever you start coding, if you are using a GitHub repository or a Git repository to be more precise, you can always start your day by doing a git pull. Once you do a git pull, only after that you should be writing your code or doing any kind of, let's say, add or commit or push. So this is it for this video, and in the next videos about Git will be covering more complex topics, but in this I just wanted to give you a brief introduction. I hope this was valuable, and you can definitely comment and let me know if anything was not clear or if there is anything you want to have a better explanation on. And I'm always very open to queries and questions and discussions, of course. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next set of videos. Bye bye, take care.